I didn't know the camera was watching me back until I saw myself on a screen that wasn't supposed to exist. By then, I had already taken the job, signed the paper, pocketed the cash advance, and ignored every little warning that should have sent me straight back to my car. My name is Ethan Miller, and 3 months ago, I was the kind of desperate that makes bad decisions look reasonable. I was 34, between jobs, behind on rent, and down to the kind of checking account balance that makes you avoid gas stations unless the warning light is already on. I had spent most of my adult life working security contracts around Western Pennsylvania. Office buildings, parking garages, warehouses, one hospital wing where half my night was telling visitors they couldn't sleep in the lobby. It was never glamorous, but it paid enough to keep the lights on. Then the company I worked for lost 2 contracts in the same month. And just like that, I became one of those guys refreshing job boards at 2 in the morning, pretending I was being productive while my landlord's emails piled up unread. The ad showed up on a Thursday night. Night security camera operator needed. Immediate start. Crescent Ridge Mall. 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. $300 per night, paid weekly. No patrol experience required. Must be comfortable working alone. I remember staring at that line for longer than I should have. Comfortable working alone. That was always how they dressed it up. What they meant was no backup, no witnesses, and no one to hear you if something went wrong. Still, $300 for sitting in a chair and watching monitors sounded like a mistake in my favor. Crescent Ridge Mall had been closed for years, but I knew the place. Everyone did. When I was a kid, my mom took me there for school shoes and cheap pizza from the food court. By the time I hit high school, half the stores were empty and the fountain had been drained. A few years later, the whole place shut down. People said it was because online shopping killed it. People also said a lot of other things, mostly after midnight and mostly on local message boards nobody admitted reading. Missing maintenance workers. Weird. Lights in the old JCPenney. Kids breaking in and hearing music from stores that hadn't had power in 8 years. I told myself all abandoned places collected stories. Empty buildings make people imaginative. That was the first lie I told myself. I applied with 1 click and expected nothing. 10 minutes later, my phone rang from a blocked number. The man on the other end said his name was Howard Blake, property manager for the Crescent Ridge Redevelopment Group. His voice was flat and tired, like he had already made this call too many times. He asked if I had security experience, if I could stay awake overnight, if I owned reliable transportation, and if I had any problem being inside a large vacant property by myself. I said no to the last one before really thinking about it. There was a pause after that, just long enough for me to hear faint static behind his breathing. Then he asked, "Can you start tonight?" I almost laughed because it sounded too easy, and easy had not been a word attached to my life in a long time. I asked about paperwork, training, background checks, all the things employers usually use to make you wait. Blake said the formal contract would be handled later, but they needed someone immediately because the last operator had quit without notice. I should have asked why. I should have asked how many people had quit before him. Instead, I looked at the rent notice taped to my fridge and said I could be there by 10:45. He gave me the address for the South Service entrance, told me to wear dark clothes, bring a flashlight, and avoid the main glass doors because the alarm system was old and sensitive. Before hanging up, he added one more thing in a quieter voice. Once you're in the camera room, don't go exploring. The building is bigger than it looks in the dark. I waited for him to explain that, but the line clicked dead. I sat there with the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to silence, trying to convince myself it was just a strange way of saying the place was unsafe. Loose tiles, exposed wires, maybe homeless people sleeping inside. Normal risks. Real risks. Risks I understood. I made coffee strong enough to taste burnt. Put on my black jacket, jeans, and old work boots, then found my flashlight in a kitchen drawer under a stack of unpaid bills. As I locked my apartment, my hand shook a little on the key. I told myself it was caffeine. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself $300 was $300, and all I had to do was watch a dozen security cameras until sunrise. I didn't know then that the mall had 13. The drive to Crescent Ridge took 40 minutes, though it felt longer because the farther I got from town, the less the road seemed to belong to anything current. Streetlights became fewer. Storefronts turned into dark shapes behind chain-link fences. The GPS kept telling me to continue straight. Even after the last open gas station disappeared in my rearview mirror, and the highway narrowed into a cracked county road lined with bare trees. It was late October, cold enough that my heater clicked and sighed under the dashboard, pushing out air that smelled faintly like dust. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other wrapped around my coffee, telling myself I had worked worse places. A vacant mall was just a building. Concrete, glass, wiring, old carpet, probably rats in the food court and water stains in the ceiling. That was all. But when Crescent Ridge finally appeared beyond the trees, my stomach tightened before I could talk myself out of it. The mall sat low and wide in the middle of a dead parking lot, its shape stretched out like something washed up and forgotten. Half the sign was missing, so the huge letters above the main entrance only read Crescent RI, the rest lost to weather or vandals. The glass doors were covered from the inside with plywood, and the old department store entrances had been sealed with metal shutters streaked brown from years of rain. A few security lights still worked along the roofline, buzzing weakly and throwing pale yellow circles onto the asphalt. Most of the lot was dark. Weeds grew through long cracks in the pavement. Shopping carts lay tipped over near a rusted cart return, their wheels frozen at odd angles. I parked near the South Service entrance like Blake told me, beside a loading dock where faded. Paint on the wall still said deliveries only. For a moment, I just sat there with the engine running. The dashboard clock read 10:43 p.m. I had 17 minutes before the shift officially began, and every part of me wanted to put the car in reverse. Then I pictured my rent notice again, folded on the kitchen counter like a final warning, and I shut off the engine. The silence outside hit immediately. Not normal quiet. Not suburban quiet with distant traffic and dogs barking somewhere down the block. This was the kind of quiet that made every small sound feel too close. My boots scraped on the pavement. My jacket zipper clicked against the flashlight in my pocket. Somewhere above me, one of the security lights hummed like an insect trapped in a wall. I walked to the service door and found a keypad next to it, exactly where Blake said it would be. The code he gave me worked on the second try. The lock buzzed, and the door opened inward with a slow metal groan that echoed deeper into the building than I liked. The smell came first. Old dust, damp carpet, stale air, and something sweet underneath it, like spilled soda that had dried years ago and never completely left. I stepped inside and let the door close behind me. The hallway beyond was narrow, painted a sickly beige, with exposed pipes running along the ceiling. My flashlight beam moved over stacked plastic crates, a broken mop bucket, and a bulletin board covered with curling notices from almost a decade earlier. Employee Halloween costume contest. Food court safety meeting. Winter sale preparation. It was strange how ordinary those papers were. Somehow that made the place worse. It reminded me that this building had once been alive in a completely normal way. People had argued over schedules here. Teenagers had complained about weekend shifts. Parents had bought pretzels and shoes and phone cases. Now every sound I made seemed to wake something that had been sleeping in the walls. I followed the hallway until it opened into the mall proper, and that was when the building changed. I had expected it to look abandoned, but I was not prepared for how much of it had been left behind. The main concourse stretched. Ahead in both directions, 2 stories high, with skylights blacked out by the night above. Storefronts stood dark and hollow behind dusty glass. Some still had mannequins posed in outdated clothes, their blank faces turned toward the walkway, as if they had been waiting for customers who never came back. A children's ride shaped like a blue cartoon dolphin sat near the old fountain, its paint chipped, its coin slot rusted. The fountain itself was dry, filled with pennies, leaves, and a few dead insects caught in the dust. Farther down, the food court sign hung crooked over a row of shuttered counters. I swept my flashlight across the upper level and stopped when the beam caught a glossy black storefront window. For half a second, I thought I saw someone behind me in the reflection, tall and still near the service hallway. I spun around so fast my shoulder hit the wall. Nothing was there. Just the hallway, the pipes, the door I had come through. My heart kicked hard once, then again. I stood there breathing through my nose, feeling ridiculous. Reflection distortion. Low light. First night nerves. That was all. I said it out loud, mostly because hearing my own voice helped prove I was alone. The security office was below the concourse in a service level that Blake called the lower operations wing. Getting there meant following a set of stairs behind a door marked authorized personnel only. The stairwell smelled colder than the rest of the mall, and my flashlight flickered once halfway down. I slapped the side of it with my palm, and the beam steadied. At the bottom, another beige hallway led to a heavy gray door with a laminated paper sign taped to it. Security control. Inside was a room barely larger than a walk-in closet. There was a metal desk, an old rolling chair, a coffee maker with no pot, a wall of monitors, and a black binder labeled Night Log. 12 screens were on when I entered, each showing a different grainy view of the mall. Food court, East Concourse, West Concourse, loading dock, main entrance, old arcade, upper level, service hallway, escalators, fountain, south stairwell, play area. I counted them twice because I did not know why I felt the need. 12 monitors, 12 camera labels. Nothing unusual except the way the images seemed too still, like photographs pretending to be live video. A manila envelope sat in the center of the desk with my name written across it in block letters. For some reason, I did not open it right away. I checked the corners of the room first, then the ceiling, then the space under the desk. That embarrassed me a little, but not enough to stop. When I finally sat down, the chair gave a tired squeak that sounded painfully loud. The monitor labeled Play Area showed the fenced-off kids section near the old fountain. Little plastic slides, soft climbing blocks, a faded sign that said children must be supervised at all times. I stared at that one longer than the others, though I could not have said why. Maybe because places made for children always feel wrong after they are abandoned. Maybe because the little red tunnel at the back of the play area looked darker than the rest of the screen. I was reaching for the envelope when the office phone rang. I nearly knocked my coffee over. The sound was sharp, old-fashioned, and impossibly loud in the tiny room. I picked it up on the third ring. Blake's voice came through thin and distant. He asked if I had made it in, if the monitors were running, if the south entrance had locked behind me. I answered yes to all of it. He told me to log each camera check every 30 minutes, stay in the room unless there was a fire or active break-in, and call him only if the police needed to be contacted. Then his voice dropped slightly. There is a sealed envelope on the desk. I looked at it. I see it. Open it after I hang up, he said. Read everything inside, even if it seems unnecessary. That made my mouth go dry. I asked him what he meant by unnecessary. For a few seconds, all I heard was static, soft and steady like someone breathing through fabric. Then Blake said, "Just do not treat the building like it is empty." The call ended before I could respond. I kept the receiver pressed to my ear until the dial tone started. Then I set it down slowly and looked at the envelope again. My name stared back at me. From the paper, written by someone who had known I was coming before I ever decided to apply. I did not touch the envelope for almost a full minute. I just sat there with the old phone beside my hand and the 12 monitors humming in front of me, trying to decide whether the chill crawling up my arms came from the basement air or from Blake's last sentence. Do not treat the building like it is empty. That was the kind of thing people said when they wanted to sound mysterious, I told myself. It was probably legal language, some liability warning dressed up in weird phrasing. Maybe squatters had been found inside before. Maybe kids broke in through the roof. Maybe redevelopment companies got sued if a new hire wandered into a dark stairwell and fell through rotten flooring. There were a dozen normal explanations, and I grabbed onto every one of them because the alternative made me feel stupid. Finally, I slid one finger under the flap and opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of yellowed paper, a temporary access badge with my name printed on it, and a small brass key taped to an index card. The badge looked new. The paper did not. It had been folded and unfolded so many times the creases were soft, and the corners were dark from handling. At the top, someone had typed night camera room rules in capital letters. Under that, in smaller print, was a sentence that made my jaw tighten. These rules are not optional after midnight. I almost laughed, but it came out as a breath instead. The list had 9 rules, each numbered and spaced like something from an employee manual. Except no employee manual I had ever seen warned you about things like listening to escalators or answering voices that knew your full name. Rule number 1 said to check every active camera every 30 minutes, but never stare at the same feed for longer than 10 seconds. Rule number 2 said if the escalators moved after midnight, I had to mute the audio and look away until they stopped. Rule number 3 said if a child appeared in the play area, I had to lock the security office door and turn off the hallway light. Then came rule number 4, underlined twice in red ink, so hard the paper was dented. Do not look at camera 13. If camera 13 turns on by itself, close your eyes until the static stops. I read that 3 times. Then I looked up at the monitors and counted again. Food court, East Concourse, West Concourse, loading dock, main entrance, old arcade, upper level, service hallway, escalators, fountain, south stairwell, play area, 12. There were 12 screens, 12 labels, 12 camera feeds. No empty monitor. No dark space on the wall waiting for a 13th input. I leaned back in the chair and felt some of the tension drain out of me. That was it. New guy prank. Creepy abandoned mall, overnight shift, strange paper in an envelope. Somebody had probably been doing this for years. The last operator quit because he did not like being alone in a dead building with old jokes and bad wiring. I could handle that. I looked back at the page. Rule number 5 said never answer the radio if the voice used my full name. Rule number 6 said if I heard music from the food court, I was not to check it in person. Rule number 7 said if any mannequin appeared on a camera where it did not belong, I had to write down the time and pretend I had not seen it. Rule number 8 said the brass key was only for the emergency breaker box, and I was not to use it unless every screen went white at once. Rule number 9 said I had to remain inside the security room between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. no matter what I saw on the monitors. At the bottom, 3 signatures were written in different ink. Caleb Ross, Martin Velez, Frank Dempsey. Frank's name was the newest, written in shaky blue pen. I did not know any of them, but seeing real names made the joke feel less funny. I told myself they were former guards trying to scare whoever came next. People who work nights get bored. They invent rituals. They pass down stories. I had done the same thing at a warehouse job years earlier, telling a rookie not to open the 3rd floor supply closet because the old manager still counted inventory in there. It had been harmless. This was probably harmless too. Still, I clipped the badge to my jacket, slipped the brass key into my pocket, and placed the rules beside the keyboard instead of throwing them away. At 11 p.m. exactly, I opened the night log. The first page had printed columns for time, camera status, notes, and initials. Most of the previous pages had been torn out. Only one old entry remained, pressed so deep into the paper it had marked the sheet beneath it. 2:22 a.m. Camera feed discrepancy. Do not engage. No initials. I stared at the words for a while, then turned to a fresh page and wrote my first entry. 11 p.m. All 12 cameras active. No movement. My handwriting looked steady, which made me feel better. The next hour passed slowly. I checked each feed, counted to 5, moved on. Food court, empty. Concourse, empty. Loading dock, empty. Play area, empty. Every now and then, the building made a sound. A pipe ticking. A ceiling panel shifting. Wind pressing against some loose piece of metal outside. I wrote them all off because old buildings settle, especially at night. Around 11:47 p.m., the monitor labeled escalators flickered. I watched the frozen metal steps sitting still between the 1st and 2nd floors. Nothing happened. At 11:52 p.m., the play area feed showed a brief line of static, and for half a second the little red tunnel looked longer than it had before. I blinked, and it was normal again. I rubbed my eyes and blamed the coffee. By 11:59 p.m., the room felt colder. The small digital clock above the monitor bank clicked to midnight without a sound, but something in the air changed so sharply that I felt it in my teeth. The monitors brightened all at once. Not much, just enough for their pale glow to fill the room like moonlight. Then one by one, each screen gave a soft electronic pop through the speakers. I looked at the wall again. 12 feeds. 12 labels. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. See, I thought. Nothing. Then the desk drawer under my right hand slid open by itself. Not fast. Not dramatically. Just one quiet inch, as if someone on the other side had pulled it with a careful finger. Inside was an old label maker strip, curled with age. I picked it up before I could stop myself. The black letters on the strip read Camera 13. Behind me, somewhere deep in the mall, a child laughed once and then went silent. For a few seconds, I did not move. I sat with that curled strip of plastic pinched between my fingers while the sound of that laugh faded into the walls, leaving the security room so quiet I could hear the blood pulsing in my ears. It had sounded like a child, but not in the way you hear kids laughing in a playground or a store aisle. It was too short, too clean, like someone had played half a second of an old recording and cut it off before the room could understand it. I looked at the monitor labeled Play Area. The little red tunnel sat empty under the grainy camera light. The phone blocks were stacked crookedly. The faded sign still said children must be supervised at all times. Nothing moved. I told myself the sound had come from outside, maybe from some animal near the loading dock, or from the building settling through the speaker system. Old public address systems sometimes picked up interference. Radios did weird things in big, empty structures. That explanation worked for almost 10 seconds. Then every monitor blinked at once. Not off, exactly, but dimmer, like the building had taken a slow breath and pulled power away from the screens. A low hum started under the desk. I leaned closer before remembering rule number 1 and pushed myself back so hard the chair wheels bumped the wall. Never stare at the same feed longer than 10 seconds. I had already been staring at the play area. I looked down at the rules, and my mouth went dry when I saw the next line. If the building becomes quieter after midnight, begin camera rotation immediately. That line had not stood out before. Now it felt like an instruction written for this exact moment. I grabbed the pen and started logging the feeds. 12:04 a.m. Food court clear. 12:05 a.m. East Concourse clear. 12:06 a.m. Loading dock clear. My hand wanted to shake, so I pressed the heel of my palm against the page until it hurt just enough to keep the letters readable. Every camera showed the same lifeless mall, but the longer I rotated through them, the more I noticed small things I had missed earlier. A chair in the food court sat pulled slightly away from the table. A trash can near the arcade had tipped onto its side. The elevator doors on the upper level were open even though they had been closed before. None of it proved anything. I kept repeating that in my head. None of it proved anything. At 12:13 a.m., the monitor at the far right made a clicking sound. It was not one of the 12 feeds. There should not have been space for another image, but the old monitor bank had a small black screen mounted below the others, something I had assumed was dead equipment. Its glass face glowed faintly, then filled with gray static. I froze with the pen still touching the paper. A white label flickered at the bottom of the screen, the letters unstable, stretching and shrinking as if the signal could not decide how to spell itself. Cam 13. My first thought was that Blake had lied. My second was that somebody had wired this on purpose to scare the overnight guard. My third thought was not really a thought at all, just a cold tightening in my chest as the static began to clear. I remembered rule number 4 and shut my eyes. That should have been the end of it. I should have kept them closed until the sound stopped. But the problem with being afraid is that fear does not always make you careful. Sometimes it makes you need proof. The static hissed softly, not through the speakers, but inside the room itself, filling the air around my face. I counted to 5, then to 10. The hissing faded. I opened my eyes just enough to see the desk, the logbook, my hands. I did not look at the screen. I told myself I had followed the rule. I told myself I was fine. Then the office lights flickered, and the monitor labeled food court changed. The chairs were no longer where they had been. Every chair in the food court had been pulled down from the tables and placed in a perfect circle around the old central planter. I stared for 3 seconds, maybe 4, then looked away. My throat felt so dry it hurt to swallow. A soft scrape came through the speakers. Metal against tile. Not loud, not sudden, just slow. I checked the escalator's feed. The escalators were moving. Both of them. The steps rolled upward and downward through the empty concourse, shining faintly in the weak camera light. There was no one on them at first. I reached for the audio controls, remembering rule number 2, but my fingers stopped over the knob because the sound changed. Beneath the scrape of machinery was another noise, something rhythmic and uneven, like footsteps trying to match the escalator's movement from the wrong direction. I knew I should mute it. The rule was clear, but some stubborn, stupid part of me needed to know if the sound was really coming from the feed or from outside the door. So I turned the volume up 1 notch. The footsteps grew louder. My skin prickled along my neck. On the screen, near the top of the down escalator, a figure appeared 1 step at a time from below the camera frame. It was too far away to see clearly, more of a shape than a person, tall and dark, standing perfectly still while the moving steps carried it downward. Its head was lowered. Its arms hung too straight at its sides. I whispered, "No," and finally slammed the mute button. The speakers went silent. The escalator kept moving on the screen, But now the room behind me made the same scraping sound. I turned slowly toward the security room door. The hallway light under the frame had gone dark. Something outside dragged one slow foot across the floor, then stopped. My hand went to the rules. I scanned the page, breathing through my mouth, searching for anything about footsteps outside the office. The answer was not there. Instead, I saw rule number 3 again. If a child appears in the play area, lock the security office door and turn off the hallway light. I had not locked the door. I had not turned off the hallway light. I looked back at the play area monitor, trying not to blink. A small figure sat at the mouth of the red tunnel with its back to the camera. It looked like a child in a winter coat, hood up, feet tucked beneath it. The figure did not move. It did not have to. The lock on the security room door clicked by itself, once, as if someone on the other side had just tested the handle. I should have locked the door the second I saw the child, but my mind was moving too slowly, snagging on every impossible thing at once. The figure in the play area sat perfectly still at the mouth of the red tunnel, small shoulders rounded under that winter coat, face turned away from the camera. Outside the security room, the handle moved once. Not a rattle, not a shake, just a careful downward press, the way someone tests a door when they do not want to be heard. I reached for the lock with my left hand while keeping my eyes on the monitor, and that was my first real mistake. The rule said lock the door and turn off the hallway light. It did not say watch the child while doing it. It did not say wait until you understood what you were seeing. My fingers found the deadbolt and twisted it. The metal slid into place with a heavy click that sounded far too loud in the room. The handle stopped moving. I looked for the hallway light switch beside the door, found it, and flipped it down. The thin glow beneath the frame vanished. For 1 second, there was relief. Then every monitor in the room went black except the small screen below them. Camera 13 was still on. I had not noticed it through the panic. I had kept my eyes away from it as best as I could, but the glow was there at the edge of my vision, pale and pulsing like a heartbeat. Static crawled across the glass. I turned my chair sideways, trying to keep it out of view, and whispered to myself that I was fine, that the room was locked, that old wiring could cause screens to fail, that fear could make a man see patterns where there were none. Then the static cleared just enough to show a hallway. Not one of the hallways from the mall map. This one was lower, narrower, with beige walls and pipes along the ceiling. It was the service hallway outside the security office. I knew that before I let myself fully look. I knew it from the angle of the floor, from the fire extinguisher mounted near the corner, from the dark rectangle of my own door at the end. And there, walking down that hallway, was me. I forgot to breathe. The man on the screen wore my black jacket, my jeans, my old work boots. His shoulders were hunched the way mine got when I was cold. His right hand held my flashlight. He moved slowly, not like someone sneaking, but like someone following instructions he did not want to obey. I looked down. My flashlight was still on the desk beside the logbook. My hands were empty. I looked back at the feed before I could stop myself. Screamy reached the security office door, turned his head toward the camera, and for a moment I thought he was going to show me his face. Instead, he raised one finger to his lips. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. This was not a prank. No one had filmed me earlier. No one could have known exactly what I was wearing, exactly where I was sitting, exactly how my hands trembled over the desk. The man on camera 13 knocked twice on the door inside the feed. At the same time, 2 soft knocks came from the real door 3 feet away from me. I nearly made a sound, but caught it in my throat. The figure on the monitor leaned close to the door, and even through the static, I could see his mouth moving. A second later, his voice came through the turned-off speakers. It was my voice, but flatter, like a recording played in an empty room. Open it before the child gets up. My eyes snapped to the play area monitor, but that screen was still black. All 12 main screens were black. Only camera 13 showed anything, and it was showing a version of me who seemed to know what would happen next. The real door knocked twice again, then 3 times. I looked at the rule sheet. Rule number 4 seemed to jump off the page. Do not look at camera 13. If camera 13 turns on by itself, close your eyes until the static stops. I had already failed. I was looking right at it. The man on the feed stepped away from the security door and moved down the hallway, turning the corner toward the stairs. For a few seconds, the camera angle changed, following him in a way no fixed security camera should have been able to do. He climbed into the main concourse. The mall looked different on that screen. The storefronts were not just dark. They looked deeper than they should have, like the inside of each abandoned shop had stretched backward into places the building did not physically contain. The food court chairs were still arranged in a perfect circle. The escalators moved silently. At the edge of the picture, near the play area, the small figure in the winter coat began to stand. Screamy stopped. He turned as if he had heard something from behind a closed storefront. Then something long and pale slipped out from the darkness of the old toy store and reached toward him. I jerked back from the monitor, knocking my knee against the desk. My pulse hammered in my throat. I told myself the screen was warning me. That was the only way my mind could make it bearable. Maybe camera 13 was not the danger. Maybe the rule was wrong, or old, or meant for someone else. Maybe whoever wrote it had not understood that the camera could show you how to survive. The feed cut to static, then returned to the security room itself, viewed from above and behind me. I saw my own back. I saw the desk. I saw the rules. I saw something standing in the corner of the room where the real wall behind me should have been empty. I did not turn around. Every muscle in my body begged me to, but I did not. Instead, I watched the screen because I thought it was the only thing keeping me alive. On camera 13, the figure in the corner leaned closer to my chair. Its shape was wrong in small ways my mind refused to name. Its head tilted as if it was reading over my shoulder. Then, on the screen, my temporary access badge flickered. The name Ethan Miller blurred into gray static and reappeared as unknown temp guard. I looked down at the real badge clipped to my jacket. The letters were changing there too. The letters on my badge did not change all at once. That would have been easier to understand, easier to dismiss as some trick of the light or a bad print job. Instead, they faded slowly, one letter at a time, like my name was being erased by something patient. Ethan Miller became Ethan Mill ER, then Ehan Mill ER, then a gray smear beneath the plastic cover. I pressed my thumb over it as if I could hold the ink in place, but when I lifted my hand, the words "Unknown Temp Guard" stared back at me in block letters. My breath came too fast. I could feel the edge of panic opening under my ribs, that animal part of the mind that does not care about rules or logic or money, only doors, exits, and distance. I wanted out of that room. I wanted the stairwell, the service entrance, my car, the cracked county road, anything that moved away from the monitors. Then camera 13 showed me exactly that. The feed changed to the south service hallway, and there I was again, or something wearing me, sprinting toward the exit with my flashlight beam jumping across the walls. The door at the far end opened to the parking lot. Cold night air rushed in. For half a second, I felt hope so sharp it almost hurt. Then the version of me on the screen stopped outside, turned slowly toward the dark parking lot, and froze. The camera angle shifted behind him. There was nothing visible between the rows of broken asphalt and dead light poles, but the security lights began going out one by one, starting at the far end of the lot and moving closer. Screaming back toward the door. Something outside whispered my name without sound, and even through the grainy image, I knew he had heard it. I shut my eyes so hard sparks burst behind my eyelids. I repeated rule number 4 in my head until the words lost meaning. Do not look. Do not look. Do not look. The static hissed. The room smelled like hot dust and old wiring. Somewhere beyond the wall, the child laughed again, softer this time, like it was farther away or closer than before. When I opened my eyes, I kept them on the desk. The rules, the logbook, the brass key, the manila envelope. Anything but the glowing screen below the monitors. That was when I noticed something else inside the envelope, something I had missed earlier because it had slid beneath the flap. A small cassette recorder, the cheap kind people used before phones made everything too easy. It was black, scratched, and labeled with masking tape. Caleb Ross. Final night. My fingers felt numb as I picked it up. Caleb Ross was one of the names at the bottom of the rules. One of the people who had signed them. Maybe he had been real. Maybe he had sat in this same chair with the same cold air pressing against the back of his neck. I pressed play. At first, there was only static and the faint click of the tape turning. Then a man's voice came through, low and close, like he had recorded it with the microphone almost touching his mouth. If you found this, you are in the room, and they gave you the list. I am sorry. I stopped breathing. The voice continued. They always make the job sound easy. They always say it is just cameras. That is how the mall gets people who will stay seated long enough to look. A dull thump sounded somewhere in the recording, followed by Caleb whispering something I could not make out. Then he came back louder, trying to stay calm. Crescent Ridge did not close because stores moved out. The stores moved out because customers kept showing up in camera footage who never entered through any door. At first, management thought it was a system issue. Old tapes overriding new footage. Reflections. Signal bleed. Then one of the janitors saw his wife on the East Concourse feed 3 years after she moved to Arizona. He went looking for her. They found his keys by the fountain the next morning, but not him. My skin went cold. I looked at the monitor labeled fountain before I could stop myself. The feed had returned on one of the main screens. The dry fountain sat empty, full of pennies and dust. A set of keys lay on the edge, bright under the camera light. I looked away fast, my pulse jumping. Caleb's recording hissed and warbled, then steadied again. Camera 13 is not part of the system. It was not installed by any contractor. It appears when the building has enough of you to work with. Your face, your voice, your habits, how you move when you are scared, how long you hesitate before opening a door. It shows you things that feel like warnings because warnings make people watch. Do not believe it. It is not showing the future. It is practicing. I gripped the recorder so tightly the plastic creaked. Practicing. The words settled into my mind like a weight. That was why the version of me had raised a finger to its lips. That was why it moved like I did, but not perfectly. It was learning the shape of me. The tape clicked, and Caleb's voice dropped to a whisper. If you see yourself on that screen, you are already late, but not gone. Not unless you answer it. Not unless you let it finish. A sound came through the tape then, a soft scrape near Caleb, followed by a voice in the background. It was his voice, saying his own name from across the room. Caleb began breathing harder. There are others in here. Copies that did not come out right. Frank tried to help me. I think Frank was real once. I do not know anymore. If a man named Frank comes to the door, check the hallway camera. If the camera shows an empty hall, do not open it. No matter what he says. At that exact moment, someone knocked on the security room door. Not the careful testing from before. 3 firm knocks, tired and human. Then an older man's voice spoke from the other side. Ethan, my name is Frank Dempsey. I know you have the rules. Open the door before camera 13 finishes with you. My hand hovered over the recorder. The tape kept playing, but Caleb's voice had gone silent. The hallway camera flickered back on among the 12 main feeds. It showed the service hallway outside my door. Empty. No Frank. No shadow. No one standing there. The knock came again, closer somehow, even though the door had not moved. Frank's voice softened. I can get you out, son, but you have to trust me right now. On the cassette, Caleb whispered one last sentence under a veil of static. It always sounds most human when it knows you are almost ready to believe it. Frank knocked 3 more times, each one steady enough to sound real. That was the worst part. The voice outside did not sound like a monster. It sounded like an exhausted older man standing in a cold service hallway, trying not to scare the only person who could still be saved. Ethan, he said, quieter now. I know Caleb left the tape. I know what he told you. He did not understand everything. My hand tightened around the recorder. The hallway camera still showed nothing but the empty corridor outside the security room. Beige walls, exposed pipes, fire extinguisher, dark floor. No man. No shadow. No breath fogging in the air. The door in the camera feed was closed and still, but the real door in front of me shivered under another knock. I looked at the rule sheet, then at the camera, then back at the door, and I hated how badly I wanted to believe him. Caleb had said Frank tried to help. The signatures at the bottom of the rules had Frank's name on them. Maybe the camera was wrong. Maybe the hallway feed was delayed, or frozen, or showing the wrong angle. Maybe camera 13 had already poisoned the whole system, and I was sitting there refusing the only real person in the building. That was how it got inside my head, not by making me curious this time, but by making me doubt the one thing I could still verify. If you are really Frank, I said, and my voice came out thin, step in front of the hallway camera. There was a pause. Somewhere in the mall, the escalators kept moving without sound. Then Frank sighed, long and sad. I wish it worked like that. I almost answered, but the cassette recorder clicked in my hand. The tape had reached the end, but instead of stopping, it began playing backward. Caleb's voice came through reversed and warped, the words folding over themselves in a wet electronic murmur. I fumbled with the stop button. Before I could press it, a new voice came out of the recorder. My voice. "He is standing right there," it whispered. "You are being rude." I dropped the recorder onto the desk. It hit the logbook and kept whispering from the speaker grill. "Open the door, Ethan. You are cold. You are tired. You are not thinking clearly." Outside, Frank said, "Do not listen to that thing." On the recorder, my voice said, "Do not listen to that thing." Both voices spoke at almost the same time, one from the door, one from the desk, each trying to sound more human than the other. My head felt full of static. I pressed my palms over my ears, but that only made my own breathing louder. I forced myself to look at the hallway camera again. Empty. The rule was simple. If the camera showed an empty hall, do not open the door. I held onto that like a rope. Then the hallway feed flickered, and for one frame, not even a full second, Frank appeared. He stood directly outside the security room, an older man in gray coveralls, thin white hair, one hand raised near the door. His face was turned toward the camera, but the image broke before I could see his expression. The feed returned to an empty hallway. My heart slammed against my ribs. That single frame did more damage than all the voices. Because now I had seen him, or something had learned what I needed to see. "There," Frank said from outside. "You saw me. Open up." My fingers moved toward the deadbolt before I realized it. I stopped with my hand inches from the lock. The skin along my arms prickled. On the monitor, the empty hallway remained unchanged. Then the small lower screen flared white. Camera 13 had come back. I shut my eyes, but not fast enough. I caught a glimpse. The feed showed the inside of the security room from the corner behind me, the impossible angle I had seen before. In that version of the room, I was standing at the door with my hand on the lock. Frank was not outside. He was behind me. He stood so close to my chair that his knees nearly touched the back of it. His coveralls hung loose on him. His head leaned at an angle that looked almost curious. And his face was not old. It was unfinished, blurred around the eyes and mouth, like a wet painting someone had tried to wipe clean. I kept my eyes squeezed shut, but the image remained burned behind them. Frank spoke through the door again, and this time the voice changed halfway through the sentence. "Ethan, open the door before it wears your face." The last 3 words came out in my own voice. I backed away so fast the chair rolled into the monitor stand. One of the main screens flickered to the old arcade. The claw machine sat dark behind dusty glass. Another screen flickered to the food court, another to the fountain. The camera system was waking up piece by piece, but every feed contained some small contradiction. A mop bucket in the arcade that had not been there. A chair moving in the food court without being touched. The fountain now filled with dark water, even though it had been dry minutes earlier. Then the hallway camera changed again. Frank appeared on it, but not outside my door. He was walking away from the security room toward the stairwell, his back to the camera, his movements stiff and slightly delayed. The real door knocked again, while the Frank on the monitor continued walking away. My stomach twisted. There were 2 of him, or there had never been one. The thing outside spoke softly. "You are making this harder than it has to be." Then it used my mother's voice to say my name. Not the way a stranger imitates someone, but the exact tired, gentle tone she used when I was a kid pretending to be asleep on the couch. My knees weakened. I had not heard that voice in years. For 1 second, the room vanished, and I was 7 years old again under a blanket in our old living room. That was when I understood what Caleb meant. It did not just copy faces. It copied whatever made you open the door. I grabbed the pen from the logbook and wrote in the margin with shaking hands, "Frank is not on the camera. Do not open." Seeing the words helped. I wrote it again beneath the first line, harder this time. "Do not open. Do not open." The knocking stopped. The silence that followed felt offended. On camera 13, though I was not looking directly at it, the static glow brightened until it painted the walls white through my closed eyelids. The recorder on the desk clicked once more. My own voice whispered from it, calm and patient. "That is okay. We can wait until 3:33. The room stayed quiet after that, but it was not the kind of quiet that meant safety. It was waiting quiet. The kind of silence that gathers itself in corners and watches how long a person can sit still before the fear starts making decisions for him. I kept my back against the wall beside the desk, eyes lowered to the rule sheet, one hand gripping the brass key, so tightly the edges pressed half moons into my palm. The monitor glow pulsed against the floor. I did not look up. I watched the digital clock above the screen bank instead, because numbers were safer than images. 2:41 a.m. 2:57 a.m. 3:08 a.m. Time had started moving strangely, sometimes crawling minute by minute, sometimes jumping ahead when I blinked. The building made small sounds around me, all of them distant, all of them careful. A soft bump from somewhere above, a scrape from the stairwell, a faint burst of music from the food court that lasted only 2 notes before cutting off. Each time, some part of me wanted to check the cameras. Each time, I remembered the voice from the recorders saying it was practicing. At 3:29 a.m., the main monitors flickered back on by themselves. I tried not to look, but the sudden light filled the room, turning the desk, the walls, and my hands a sickly blue-white. Every screen showed a different part of the mall, and for the first time all night, the building looked crowded. Not with people exactly, with possibilities. On the food court feed, every chair sat in a circle, and in each chair was a dark human shape facing inward. On the upper level, mannequins stood along the railing where no mannequins had been before, their blank heads turned toward the camera. In the old arcade, the dead machines flashed without power, screens cycling through attract modes for games that did not exist. The play area showed the child in the winter coat standing inside the red tunnel, still facing away. The hallway outside my room remained empty. That was the only thing I trusted, and even that trust felt thin. I lowered my gaze to the desk and began writing in the log because writing kept my hands from reaching for the door. 3:30 a.m. Remain in room. Do not answer. Do not look at camera 13. My handwriting slanted badly. The pen scratched so loud I could hear it over the electric hum. Then the clock clicked to 3:33 a.m., and every camera became me. The food court was gone. The escalators were gone. The arcade, the fountain, the play area, the hallway, all gone. Each of the 12 main monitors now showed the security room from behind my chair. 12 versions of the same room. 12 versions of Ethan Miller. In one, I stood at the door with my hand on the lock. In another, I crawled under the desk with both hands clamped over my ears. In another, I spoke into the radio, my mouth forming words I could not hear. In another, I sat perfectly still while something leaned over my shoulder, close enough that its blurred face almost touched mine. I shut my eyes, but it was too late. The images had already slipped into my head. They did not feel like dreams or hallucinations. They felt like choices. That was what made them dangerous. Each screen was showing a mistake I might make if I panicked in exactly the right way. The radio on the desk crackled. I had forgotten it was there. A voice came through, official and calm. Security operator, this is Howard Blake. We have a police unit outside the south entrance. Unlock the service door and proceed upstairs. My heart lurched toward the sound before my brain caught up. Blake would not call on the radio. Blake had used the office phone. Rule number 5 said never answer the radio if the voice used my full name, but the voice had not used it yet. That almost made me speak. Then the radio clicked again. Ethan Robert Miller, respond. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep silent. Not hard enough to draw anything, just enough pain to anchor me. The voice changed instantly. It became frank. He is outside now. Your copy. He is wearing you better than before. Another click. My mother's voice, soft and close. Honey, open the door. I slid the radio across the desk away from me. It stopped at the edge, then slowly slid back by itself. The child laughed through the speaker. The monitors brightened. On one screen, a version of me unplugged the camera console. On another, a version of me smashed the lower monitor. On another, I covered the cameras with my jacket. Each time, something different happened to him. The system was testing outcomes, showing me options that were not safe because it had already rehearsed them. My mouth tasted like metal from fear. I looked down at rule number 8. The brass key is only for the emergency breaker box. Do not use it unless every screen goes white at once. The screens were not white. They were full of me. But the recorder had said camera 13 appeared when it had enough of me to work with. If I kept sitting there, if I kept watching even by accident, I was feeding it. I needed to do something it had not predicted. Not run. Not open the door. Not talk. Not follow any version of myself on the screen. I crawled under the desk and felt along the wall until my fingers found the power strip. The monitors made a low whining sound, like they knew what I was touching. Every screen changed at once. Now they all showed me under the desk from impossible angles. One Ethan reached for the wrong cord. One Ethan froze. One Ethan looked up. I kept my eyes on my hands and pulled the entire strip from the outlet. The room plunged into darkness. The silence hit so hard I thought my ears had stopped working. Then the lower screen, camera 13, turned on without power. Its white glow spread across the floor under the desk. I did not look at it. I grabbed the chair by one leg and swung it toward the glow as hard as I could. The impact cracked glass, and the screen screamed with static. Not a loud scream. A thin electronic shriek that crawled through my teeth and made my eyes water. I swung again. The glow fractured. Again. The room went black. Something outside the door slammed both hands against it. Not trying to break in, just angry enough to remind me it was there. I dropped the chair and backed into the corner, chest heaving, eyes shut. The radio whispered from the desk, even though I had unplugged everything. "We did not show you this one." That was when I understood. For the first time all night, it had not known what I would do. The door handle turned slowly in the dark. The deadbolt held. From the other side, using my voice, it said, "Then we will wait for sunrise together." For a long time after the screen went dark, nothing happened. That was almost worse than the noise. I stayed wedged in the corner of the security room with my knees drawn up, the broken chair somewhere near my feet, the unplugged power strip on the floor, and my eyes squeezed shut so tightly my forehead ached. The building had stopped moving. No escalators. No footsteps. No child laughing from the play area. No Frank at the door. No radio whispering in my voice. Just the slow, uneven sound of my own breathing and the faint settling groans of an old mall remembering how to be only a mall again. I do not know how long I sat like that. Time had stopped being something I trusted. Every few minutes, I opened one eye and looked only at the floor, never at the monitor wall, never at the cracked lower screen. The darkness in the room had softened from black to gray, and at some point I realized the thin line under the security room door was no longer dark. Pale morning light had found the hallway. That single strip of light almost made me cry. I checked my phone. No signal, but the clock read 5:58 a.m. 2 minutes. 2 minutes until the shift was over. 2 minutes until this became a story I could leave behind. A terrible night I would spend the rest of my life explaining to myself as stress, faulty wiring, carbon monoxide, anything but what it was. At 6 a.m., the office phone rang. I flinched so hard my shoulder hit the wall. The sound was ordinary again, sharp and mechanical, not distorted, not whispering. I let it ring 5 times before crawling to the desk and lifting the receiver with both hands. Blake's voice came through, tired but clear. "Miller, are you there?" I almost laughed at the sound of my own last name coming from a real person. "I am here," I said. My voice cracked. "Open the south service door and meet me in the lot," he said. "Do not touch anything else in that room." I looked at the dead monitors, the broken glass on the floor, the cassette recorder, the rule sheet, and my badge with unknown temp guard printed where my name had been. "I am done," I said. "I am not coming back." There was a pause. "Most do not," Blake replied, and then the line went dead. I did not like that answer, but I liked the light under the door more than I hated him. I waited another full minute before unlocking the deadbolt. My fingers were stiff, and for one breathless second, I thought the lock would not turn. When it finally clicked open, I stepped into the service hallway with my flashlight raised even though the overhead lights were on again. The hall was empty. Not almost empty. Completely empty. No Frank. No child. No wet footprints. No strange marks. No impossible shadow waiting at the corner. The fire extinguisher hung on the wall exactly where it belonged. The beige paint looked cheap and harmless. That made me feel worse. The mall above was the same. The escalators were still. The food court chairs were stacked on tables again. The fountain was dry, filled with pennies and dead leaves. The play area sat empty behind its low fence, the red tunnel short and ordinary in the gray morning light. I wanted to run, but I forced myself to walk because running felt like giving the building one last chance to chase me. Blake stood outside by a white pickup truck with the engine running. He was older than I had imagined, clean-shaven, bundled in a dark overcoat, holding a paper coffee cup he had not touched. He looked past me toward the service entrance, not at my face. "Where is Frank?" I asked. Blake's jaw tightened. "Frank Dempsey died before the mall closed." The words were so calm that for a second I thought I had misheard him. Then why was his name on the rules? Blake finally looked at me. His eyes were red, like he had not slept either. Because he wrote some of them. I did not ask anything else. There are answers you can feel waiting behind a sentence, and I knew if I let him keep talking, part of me would never get out of that parking lot. I walked straight to my car. Blake did not stop me. He only called after me once, saying I would still be paid. I told him to keep the money. Then I drove until the mall vanished behind the trees, until the county road became highway, until the first open diner appeared beside a gas station, and I pulled into the lot because my hands were shaking too badly to keep driving. Inside the bathroom, under bright fluorescent lights, I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. I still looked like me. Pale, exhausted, stubble on my jaw, eyes bloodshot, same scar near my eyebrow from a bike wreck when I was 12. My badge was gone. I did not remember taking it off. I checked my jacket, my pockets, the car floor. Nothing. That should have bothered me more, but at the time I was too relieved to care. I went home, slept for 14 hours with every light in my apartment on, and spent the next week pretending I was sick. I blocked Blake's number. I ignored 2 emails from the redevelopment company. I did not look up Crescent Ridge. I did not check local forums. I did not tell the police, because what would I have said? That a dead mall had tried to learn my face through a camera that did not exist? By the 8th day, I had almost convinced myself that leaving had been enough. Then a padded envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was the cassette recorder, my temporary badge, and the rule sheet from the security room. My name was back on the badge, but not printed under my photo. It was printed on the back, beneath Caleb Ross, Martin Valles, and Frank Dempsey. Ethan Miller. The rule sheet had 10 rules now. The first 9 were the same. The 10th had been typed at the bottom in fresh black ink. Rule number 10. If camera 13 follows you home, do not let it see where you sleep. I stood in my kitchen staring at that line while the apartment around me seemed to shrink. Then my laptop on the table turned on by itself. No startup sound. No login screen. Just a live video window opening over a black desktop. At first, I thought it was showing the security room again. Same pale angle. Same grainy static. Then I recognized the cheap curtains, the leaning bookshelf, the pile of unpaid bills by the microwave. It was my bedroom, filmed from the upper corner near the ceiling. I did not own a camera. The label at the bottom of the window read CM13, bedroom. That was when I understood the real purpose of rule number 4. It was never only there to keep me from seeing what lived inside the mall. It was there to keep whatever lived inside the mall from seeing enough of me to find a way out. I survived that night, but I did not leave alone. And if you ever take a job in an empty building, if they hand you a list of rules and one of them tells you not to look at a certain camera, do not test it. Do not wonder what makes that screen different from the others. Do not tell yourself it is only static. Because the moment you look long enough to see it, it has already started looking back.